Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. And as always on Tuesdays, we got a nice big full slate of action. You got Clayton Kershaw on the mound. He costs only $15,000 tonight for you. He's expensive. He's got an incredible matchup against a team that's terrible against lefties and one of the best pitchers parks in all of baseball. Literally the only negative, it's the smallest total on the night, biggest favorite. Only negative is that they don't strike out a lot. They don't make a lot of good contact either. But that's not to say that Kershaw can't still end up going 12, 13 Ks or doing whatever he wants against this bad lineup. But 15 Ks is pretty prohibitive. So for me, there are some bats I want to pay for. For me, I'm not saying Kershaw is not a cash game option, but I probably am not going to be able to fit him in my cash game tonight.
Yeah, it's going to really depend on what these lineups look like out here in a little bit because I have a really hard time not paying for him. I know he's super expensive. What does he leave you with if you put him in? 38? Is that right?
38.88. So yeah, right about.
And that does make it tough. But in cash games, I have a really hard time passing him up because, like you said, basically everything points to him having a really nice game here.
Yeah.
I like some of these other guys a decent amount. Like DeGrom's pretty solid against Baltimore, who strikes out a lot as a GPP play at least, but I don't love him in cash games. Garrett Richards has a nice money line of 175 against the White Sox, who've been struggling a little bit again. Shields against Atlanta, who's a team that doesn't hit really well, but Shields hasn't been anything special lately.
Yep.
Liriano against Arizona is all these guys are like GPP plays to me, which is making me really, really want to play Kershaw. But finding a second pitcher to go with Kershaw is kind of the tough part today.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you mentioned, all those other guys. At least Liriano's a huge favorite. You still don't love the matchup. We saw Arizona get to Garrett Cole last night, but if you ask me, Liriano's had the longer track record of success. He's also been around a lot longer, but his swing and strike rate 14%, ground ball rate almost 54. You kind of think that even if he does get hit, it's not going to be significant. So I think he's probably my favorite of those guys, just because he is a big favorite and a significant discount from Kershaw. And I want to like James Shields a lot, and I do like him. I love his price and matchup, but like you said, he's not striking out a ton of guys. He does have 15 in his last two games, but he's still giving up too many runs, too many home runs. Didn't give up any to the Reds, but 3 to Philly.
Yeah.
So if he keeps the ball in the park, which he should be able to, because Atlanta, they have the third lowest team ISO in the last month. They just have nobody with any power. So maybe all those fly balls he gives up stop at the warning track is kind of what you're hoping for there at 8,600. But those are the guys I guess I'm looking at the top.
Yeah, I like Richards a decent amount. He's probably, I would say, my favorite cash game play if you're not paying for Kershaw. I'm not super pumped about his upside or anything like that, but he's averaging 7 1/3 innings pitched over his last 6 starts. He's got a complete game in there. He hasn't been fantastic, but he's only allowed 3 or 4 runs in each of the last 5 starts after that complete game shutout against Boston. There's a decent amount of strikeouts in here. He had an 11 strikeout game against Cleveland in 7 1/3 the other day. There's a lot of cash game stuff to like in there, and he's a pretty nice favorite. I don't love paying $9,800 for him. If he was James Shields' price, I'd be all over him today.
Yeah.
But $9,800 is kind of tough. It is a $5,200 discount from Kershaw, though, if you're looking to get some better batters in your lineup. Obviously, we got a game in Coors today with Washington and Colorado, so there are going to be some expensive bats on this slate. So it's definitely something to look at. As far as other options go that are cheaper, R.A. Dickey is probably my favorite mid-range option at $7,000 against Philly. Dickey's been really, really solid lately. I think it's 7 straight starts now. He's gone at least 6 innings. The first time in 7 starts that he gave up more than 2 runs. Last time out against Oakland, he gave up 3. So not a bad game there either. He's obviously got the Blue Jays behind him with what I think is the best offense in the league. He's won 4 of the last 5 starts with a no decision in the other one. He's not striking anybody out really. He's been between 3 and 5, sometimes 6 over the last few outings. Nothing special there, but he's a guy that can give you easily 7 innings in this game. And and a quality start. And at 7,000, I think that's a pretty solid cash game play.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like you said, he hasn't had one of those implosions recently, and his value is pitching deep in the game, but he's effective. He's efficient. So when he pitches deep, he doesn't need to get you 7 or 8 strikeouts if he gets you 7 innings, only giving up a few hits. So
Yep.
I like him. One cheap guy that I'm looking at, you don't love the ballpark factors, of course, but 3 of his last 4 games, he's got 21 or more fantasy points. Kevin Gausman, $5,100. He's so cheap that, it is a good matchup against a Mets team that's, they've been better since Cespedes came over, but still not a daunting offense. Not very many guys. You worry about guys like Granderson, Cespedes, of course, but Lucas Duda, been, on the shelf. I don't know, who knows? He's been day to day for seemingly like a year. They're saying maybe he comes back today. Obviously, that's going to scare me off him just a little bit, but I mean, even Duda's been, much better at home and against lefties even. So I think 5,100. There's not a whole lot of risk with him. He does have a little bit of upside against this team. They're striking out 23% of the time in the last 30 days too.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really solid GPP play at worst. I mean, 5,100 is just such a good price there on DraftKings, especially for the upside that he has. Another guy that's interesting, Eduardo Rodriguez against a Cleveland team that hasn't been very good against lefties. Minus 125 favorite, only 6,300. He's probably a guy I'll consider a little bit also, although I do prefer Dickey quite a bit in cash games there for even the 700 more. Rodriguez is a GPP play, is pretty solid though. I had one other guy that I liked, but there's not a ton of pitchers on this slate that I'm really excited about. I lost who it was though. Oh, Trevor Bauer against Boston. On the other side of that game, he's 7,700, so that's not a guy I'm going to be paying for in cash games. But as a GPP play, I think he's going to be pretty low owned at that price. He's been pretty good lately. It's a high over/under, which should keep his ownership percentage down too. Obviously, Boston's been hot, but we know that's not a team that is as good as they've been playing over the last few games. So I think he's an interesting play also.
Yeah, one more guy I think is interesting, and you hate targeting anybody against Kansas City, but Raisel Iglesias has 3 straight quality starts. One of them at Arizona, which is obviously a real tough ballpark. Had a terrible first inning last time, but then he retired the last 16 batters. I mean, looked good. So certainly a risky option. Not a whole lot of strikeout upside, but he's the kind of guy that you're playing because he's cheap, and you just hope he gives you a quality start. You're not expecting him to. I mean, nobody's really going to mow down this team either.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on here to catcher, where it's not significant, but the wind is blowing out of Wrigley Field. So go ahead and throw Kyle Schwarber into your GPP lineups because he's got about as big of upside as anybody at catcher today. But then, of course, the guy that was the big play last night paid off in a big way. Brian McCann, once again at home against an average or bad righty, depending on your opinion, I guess. $4,700 is pricey, but he may just be the top option again at catcher.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I have a hard time going any other direction there. I do like Schwarber quite a bit, though. So, I mean, anytime the wind's blowing out at Wrigley, that's always a fun game to play some hitters in, especially with Anibal Sanchez, who, I mean, we've seen go just absolutely crazy, allowing home runs at times. I mean, Schwarber's really expensive, but I think the upside's worth it today.
Yeah, certainly. And then some other options for you that are a little bit cheaper. If you want to go back to Jonathan Lucroy, he gets a bad lefty again. He was a big disappointment last night, but had a couple decent games before that. So $3,500 for him. I don't think he's a bad option. And then John Jaso's a guy, $3,200. Scott Feldman's actually been pretty good, holding lefties under a 300 WOBA. But Jaso, I mean, hitting a top offense that's just on fire right now. I don't mind targeting him either. He doesn't have a ton of upside, but I think he's a nice cash game play still.
Yeah, I definitely like him as a cash game play. I mean, it's just really hard to argue with that at that price.
Yeah, and I mean, as you're looking at cheap guys, really nobody that stands out to me. You can look at a guy like Chris Jimenez, who's got some power upside. Sashi Iwakuma obviously coming off that no-hitter last time out, but it is a game in Texas with the big total, and Iwakuma's biggest struggle is the long ball. So if you're going cheap, that's probably the one cheap guy I'm looking at. Nobody else really standing out to me.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, it's hard to go any other direction as far as cheap guys go. The only other guy I'll mention, Yan Gomes against the lefty today. Yep. I'm hoping he's going to hit probably 5th in the order. I think he's a pretty interesting GPP play, if nothing else. He's a little too expensive for me to play him over someone like JSO, though, so I'm going to relegate him to GPPs probably.
Yeah, I completely agree there. First base options, your top two guys are two guys that you love to play, but both have tough matchups. Goldschmidt, best hitter in baseball as far as qualified hitters go since beginning of 2013 versus lefties. So if you want to pay that, I'll probably have a couple pieces of him here and there, but obviously a tough match against Liriano. Chris Davis gets DeGrom, another tough matchup there, but at least he has a good ballpark behind him. The guys I'm looking at the most, I like Eric Hosmer a lot. He's been on fire over the past, batting almost 400 over his last 30 games. Still, nobody ever seems to play this guy. You got to like him. And he's like we always know, he's going to have low ownership. Albert Pujols, of course, against Cy Danks. Who knows what Danks we're going to see tonight, but this guy's still not a good pitcher. I'm still not a believer. I don't know about you, but we know this guy's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going back to the Pujols well again tonight. I think he just is consistently underpriced because of his batting average, 4,200. I think he's a rock solid play in basically every format. I agree with you. I'm not a huge believer in Danks. I mean, we've seen that he can be good at times, but I mean, with two really good righties in the lineup in Pujols and Trout, I feel pretty good about both of those guys today.
Yeah, definitely. And then if you're looking for cheap guys, Ben Paulson at Coors Field, $3,500. Not a guy that you love on paper, but I mean, it's a cheap bat at Coors Field. I probably prefer to play him in the outfield because there's a lot of other much better first base options, though. Other guys you can look at, Pedro Alvarez is heating up a lot right now, $3,300. Yep. I believe he's got 4 homers in his last 7 games. So Chase Anderson, not a pitcher that I'm avoiding tonight. So probably about as cheap as I'm going to go today at first base because I like a lot of these top options.
Yeah, I like a lot of the top options too. It's another day where I'm not going cheap either.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony Rizzo, Joey Votto, a couple other guys will throw in there too. Ryan Zimmerman if you want, but I don't like paying a borderline elite price tag for a guy that's not an elite hitter.
What's he? I mean, he's just been so bad all year. I mean, he's been a little bit better lately, but I mean, he's got a 267 WOBA against righties on the year. I mean, 139 ISO's okay. Obviously, Hale's not a great pitcher. He's in Coors. So, I mean, there's stuff to like there, but he's just been so bad that I have a really hard time paying $4,600 for him when I can get Pujols against Danks for 42. Or, I mean, there's basically all the guys you mentioned. Cabrera is far and away my favorite GPP play, I think.
Yep.
And then even Goldschmidt against a lefty, despite it being Liriano, is a great GPP play too, like you said.
Yeah, and we'll get to this. Oh, I guess I can go ahead and say it here. Miguel Cabrera, like you mentioned, he's in a great spot. Of course, Jason Hamill's been struggling recently,
yep.
And I think I prefer him a little bit at third base tonight, just because there aren't as many options as I like. So I don't know about you there, but that's something I love doing with Miguel Cabrera on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Get him at third base. So
yeah, I definitely agree.
All right, second base options. Hard not to like Brian Dozier at 4,400 against CC Sabathia. I mean, we know the drill by now. Sabathia's terrible against righties. Dozier's great against lefties. Had a solid game last night with 3 hits, stole a base, tried to steal a second base, got caught. So you like him. You like the upside with D. Gordon against Tyler Cravey, who, small sample size, of course, but has really struggled with left-handed batters. Gordon, back-to-back multi-hit games, back-to-back games with a stolen base. I mean, he could put up points in a hurry despite the fact that he has 0 power.
Yeah, definitely. Other guys at second base. One guy that's really interesting to me is Chris Coughlin has second base eligibility on DraftKings now, and he's been hitting third in the lineup for the Cubs. I mentioned Sanchez is a guy that can blow up at times. If he's hitting third tonight for 3,100 at second base, he's a guy that's probably going to be in quite a few of my lineups.
Yeah, I like that call a lot. I mean, he's cheap, and like you said, definitely getting that second base eligibility. Tonight there are other options, but I mean, definitely with that wind blowing, he's got power. I mean, a double-dong game a couple games ago. So,
yep.
Colton Wong's the guy I like a lot. I like a lot of the Cardinals lefties. Vogelsong, awful against lefties, 374 WOBA on the season, and this is nothing new. He's always struggled with left-handed batters, so I like him. I think Neil Walker's too cheap at $3,600 against Chase Anderson as well. We know he hits much better from left side of the plate, so those are the main guys that I'm looking at here.
Yeah, same here. I don't have anyone too different from you. I mean, I'm going to have a ton of Dozier against Sabathia. I'm going to try and play him as much as I possibly can for 4,400. I mean, I don't love the price, but if I have the money, that's probably the guy I'm spending on today.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I mean, I think he's the top option, and he's not even priced like it. 6th most expensive guy, so definitely like that. Third base, we mentioned Miguel Cabrera with the versatility there. There's not a whole lot of Coors bats that I feel like I really want exposure to, but Nolan Arenado is definitely one of them. He's been killing right-handed pitching this year. Jordan Zimmerman is, I think, a slightly above average pitcher. I mean, he's certainly not going to be an average pitcher in Coors. I think that if I'm looking at Colorado bats, I'm looking at the guys with power, and Arenado and Cargo, of course, those guys that you're looking at the most. Elsewhere at third base, Matt Carpenter, another lefty against Vogelsong that I like. And then, of course, the Twins righties, Miguel Sano, Trevor Plouffe. Take your pick there. Sano probably going to be the more popular play, but Plouffe, your nice little swerve, well, also with some upside, because Sano's actually been better against righties than lefties. I don't expect that to continue because he was really good against lefties in the minor leagues, but definitely if you want lower ownership with still having upside, Plouffe's probably your way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really like Sano, but I don't know if it's worth paying for the difference with how good Plouffe has been against lefties. So that's what kind of makes the difference there for me. I think Chris Bryant, another Cub, is a fine play at 4,400. I don't even mind Alex Rodriguez at 4,400. There's a lot of high-priced third basemen that I feel pretty good about. As far as cheaper guys go, Derek Dietrich is only 3,000 again on DraftKings against a righty and Cravey in Milwaukee. I think gives him some nice power upside. As far as cheap guys go, I mean, there's not really anything I like at third base, to be completely honest. I mean, Aaron Hill against Liriano as a lefty is an okay play, but I mean that's not an elite matchup by any means. I think Dietrich is probably the lowest I would go at third base. That's probably going to be a position I spend a little bit of money on.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, as we saw last night, he showed his power, hit a homer last night. Justin Turner is a guy I like. He's been better against righties than lefties, but Felix Doubront, I mean, he's a fringe major leaguer at this point. Yep. So I definitely want to be picking on him. And then another guy who's been hitting the ball really well, Brock Holt, $3,600. Mentioned Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer is a solid pitcher, but number I saw earlier, he's 19th among all qualified pitchers in hard hit rate, and that's bottom 19. So when he gets hit hard. And Brock Holt, if he's hitting atop that Boston order again today, I don't mind targeting him at $3,600.
Yeah, I don't either. I think that's a fine play. Moving over to shortstop, there's a little bit more value there. That's one that I feel quite a bit better about, actually, to not spend money is, I mean, we can start at the top, I guess. Top guys, Jose Reyes, I think, is a really solid play against Zimmerman today. Zimmerman doesn't hold guys on well. Hasn't been super effective this season, especially against left-handed pitchers. Reyes is not as expensive as Desmond, who I prefer him to. Desmond, obviously, the Washington guy you're going to want to look at in Coors. I think Tulo's a fine play against Nola as a under-owned GPP guy. Outside of that, I'll probably be going a little bit cheaper. I mean, there's a lot of cheap options. Is there anybody else you like at the top?
Really nobody at the top. No, those are the guys. I mean, Nola's had those home run struggles. Reyes hasn't been great, but we know he's got the skills. I mean, he hasn't been impressive recently, but you got to like the situation. One of these days, he's going to have one of those vintage games where he steals a couple bases, gets a couple doubles. So I don't mind that. I kind of like Hanley Ramirez's price, actually, against Trevor Bauer at only $4,000. I don't think a lot of people will probably be on him because you usually target him against lefty, but I still like to take advantage of that price tag and the versatility there when he's at shortstop.
Yeah, definitely. As far as cheap guys go, Kiki Hernandez is by far my favorite shortstop play today against Doubront. Probably going to hit second in the order with Howie Kendrick still out, as far as I know. I absolutely love him today, even at 2,800 on DraftKings. I think he's far and away the top play. Cesar Hernandez is only 3,000 against Dickey. If you're not throwing Dickey, I think he's solid. Jose Iglesias, we mentioned Hamill's been struggling. He's going to be hitting right in front of Cabrera, and he's only 2,900. And then Eric Ibar is probably a decent cash game play against Danks, assuming he's hitting up back towards where Trout and Pujols are at. I know he was, I think, 7th in the order yesterday. If he's back in like the 5-hole or the 2-hole, since they're facing the lefty, I'd feel pretty good about him too.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But I'm in complete agreement there. The Kike Hernandez, especially if he's batting second, that's the guy that I'll be playing more often than not. Outfield options. If you brought your wallet with you, maybe you can afford Bryce Harper at $6,400. But good luck, because I'm trying to think. I feel like when Paul Goldschmidt was the most expensive on the board, I feel like he only ever got to 63. So I
Yeah,
think
he was up there though.
yeah, I think Harper might be the most expensive anyone all season. But I mean, you can't dislike the matchup against David Hale. So his ownership, I'm having a hard time with that. I don't know if it'll be higher than it should be because of that price, or people won't pay because of the price. So I mean, still a guy I want in tournaments, but there's no way in hell I'd be paying for him in cash games at that price, regardless of who I'm pitching. So he's your top option if you can afford it. Of course, Mike Trout, you already mentioned. We already know the story with him. We shouldn't need to tell you about that. Jose Bautista at Philly against Aaron Nola, who's been struggling with the long ball. I mean, that's all that Bautista does. He walks and he hits home runs. So hopefully they get guys on base for him for once. But either way, I mean, Bautista's got big-time upside too.
Yeah, absolutely. I like Ryan Braun again against the lefty for 4,800. I know the Brewers weren't super good last night, but I have a lot of confidence in Braun against lefties, especially a guy like Conley that hasn't proven anything at the major league level.
Yep.
Jacoby Ellsbury is interesting today against Pelfrey. That also means that all the other Yankees lefties are pretty interesting against Pelfrey at home. I think that's a fine stack as usual. I'm not super excited about any of them. But I like all of them for the most part.
And Beltran's been on fire recently.
Yeah, Beltran has been on fire. That's a good point. He's probably my favorite individual play based on price, honestly. He's a little bit up there on DraftKings, but
yeah.
I like him a decent amount today. He's, 3,800 on DraftKings now? Yeah.
Yeah, way too cheap for as well as he's been hitting for sure.
Yeah, he's been on fire. With Teixeira out of the lineup, I'm assuming tonight he's probably going to hit at least fifth, I would guess. He might even just take Teixeira's spot, honestly. I assume they're going to have Bird in the lineup tonight. What is he Is he outfield eligible on DraftKings? No, he's only first base.
So.
Okay. I don't like him so much at first base. If he was outfield eligible, I would have liked him a little bit. But as far as cheaper guys go, I'll mention Gregory Blanco for like the 100th straight day. It feels like he's only 3,800 still, leading off against Chase Anderson. I think that's a rock solid cash game play with some upside. As far as like really cheap guys go, my favorite, Ryan Rayburn against a lefty. He's going to be hitting cleanup. 387 WOBA against lefties, 233 ISO. He's only 2,500. I think he's my favorite value play. We mentioned Chris Coughlin at second base. I prefer him there, but he's a fine value play in the outfield too. Shane Victorino is 2,400 and probably going to lead off again against the lefty. You can go back to our podcast from yesterday and listen to what I said about Coco Crisp because he didn't play yesterday, and I'm assuming he's going to be back in the lineup hitting second again against Kershaw. But, I mean, I don't want to play him against Kershaw. He's been so bad against other pitchers this year that it makes it really tough. But he is only back. He's back all the way down to minimum 2,000 again. So probably worth looking at. Other value guys. Oh, all the Dodgers guys against the lefty. I think Scott Van Slyke's banged up, which I would think would mean Alex Guerrero is likely to be in the lineup and hitting somewhere decent, maybe sixth or so. He's probably a decent play.
That's what we'll be waiting on, like it seems like we always are. I said there's a possibility Van Slyke comes back, but who knows? But I mean, I'm with you. Either one of those guys get in the lineup, and I'm playing whichever one's in.
Yeah, and Kiki Hernandez is also eligible in the outfield. I strongly prefer him at shortstop, but I think he's a fine play in the outfield also. We talked about Michael Bourne a couple times over the last week with him hitting leadoff. He's facing Shields tonight, which isn't ideal, but as a leadoff hitter for 2,400, it's kind of hard to argue with.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And I got one more cheap guy. He bet at fifth last night. Been pretty good since he came up. Abraham Almonte is only $2,000, so you assume probably Rayburn is going to hit fourth, maybe Gomez fifth, so he'll probably be down there at sixth. But either way, absolute minimum salary for a guy that's got a little bit of pop in his bat. I don't mind targeting that because Eduardo Rodriguez, you mentioned him as a GPP play, and I like that as well. But, I mean, there's not a whole lot of middle ground with him. He either gets crushed or looks great. So and you get a lot of these Cleveland bats for really cheap. If they go off, that's going to be a nice value stack for you. All right, that's going to wrap things up for us here. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.